Welcome back to the Enneagram Mom interviews. I'm Whitney Ellison. We are wrapping up this series. We have only 4 more episodes. So I'm cherishing all of these episodes and these visits with these amazing women. I hope you are as well. And happy Friday. Busy day for me. I'm wondering how your Fridays are. I hope today's going to be great for you. Today we have a wonderful guest, Maggie Gough, and I'm going to talk about her in just a second. But first, as a reminder, the Enneagram is a wonderful tool for developing self-awareness and empathy. And our mission with this show is to amplify mom voices by telling our stories, honoring our differences, and offering useful tips from our specific Enneagram strengths that will help all moms and all parents in general. I see Fresh Start Photo just joined us. Good morning, Dawn and John. Hope you guys are doing great. Today's episode is sponsored by Fit Philosophy. Fit Philosophy is a balanced approach to fitness. They offer both live, in-person and virtual workouts. And today's episode is very special. They're doing their last giveaway, which is you can enter a drawing to win a virtual 40 Days to Personal Revolution series. And that's a yoga series. January and February, I believe, 40 days. And so that's a great way to kick off the winter, doing some yoga. It's going to be led by Jessica Mullenkamp. Let's see, it's January 31st through February 28th. So if you follow Maggie, Realize Wellbeing, and I'll post all of this at the end of the show. If you follow Maggie, follow Wellison Enterprises, and follow Fit Philosophy, and comment on this post when it is posted, you will be entered into a drawing to win this virtual 40 Days to Personal Revolution series. With that being said, I'd like to welcome Maggie Gough. And Maggie, if I'm saying your last name wrong, just correct me when we jump on. I want to make sure I get it right. Maggie is the owner and founder of Realize Wellbeing, and she will talk more about her organization in a minute, which is a fantastic organization. She is a mother of 3, and she is a 2-wing 3. So Maggie, I'm going to bring you on now, and we will get to talking. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. It's so
I'm
great to see you.
I know.
Thank you for joining me on a Friday morning. I appreciate it. How are you today?
I am doing really well. The sun is out, and so this is like the superpower that we're all holding on to right now.
Vitamin D. And that sunshine is amazing. And I think it's going to be like 70 in our area today. So perfect fall weather. Amen to that.
Yes.
So let's talk. First of all, did I say your last name right? That has been
You did.
something nerve-wracking for me. So it's Gough, Gough, right? Okay.
Yep.
Got it. All right. Well, so let's start with tell us about you, who you are and what you are up to these days.
Well, I am a female business owner, and I have worked in corporate wellness for the past 15 years. And 10 years ago, I left the center of the industry because I didn't like any of the things we were doing to people. And so I did what women do. And I thought, this isn't working and there needs to be a new way. And so I created a new way. I am married. I have 3 children, a 9-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old daughter, and a 3-year-old son.
Oh.
And so
Very relatable.
We're living our best life right now, even in the midst of COVID. So
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to break down a few things that you said that I think are really interesting. First, you said you left the center of the industry about 5 years ago. So we'll talk about your business for a minute. Tell me about what your business does and what the center of the industry looked like 5 years ago.
So when I left, I personally was really broken. Like my marriage was a mess. I had my 2nd child. I was the primary earner in my family. I was going through postpartum anxiety, undiagnosed.
Yeah.
And I was unfulfilled in my work, and my values weren't aligned with my employer. And so this was just like on every front, I had no well-being, right?
Yep.
So no mental well-being, no emotional well-being, no social well-being. I was really
Yep.
lost. And so when I thought about the work that I had done in my education, my background is as a dietitian. So, you know, a lot of education around food and taking good care of yourself from a physical standpoint. It's like nothing I had ever created would have helped me in that moment.
Okay.
And that was the wake up call. It was
Got
like,
it.
we have to do better. Like, this is not what people need when they're down and out. They don't need us to come in and be like, well, your real issue is that you're not eating enough fruits and vegetables. So let's perfect that for you, right?
Yes.
What people need is a place to just be okay and to start mining all the stuff that's happening and to start figuring out, like, why are we so outside of our well-being? Why is that so lost? And they need a space to do that just sitting safely with somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really interesting is that my first contract I got was coaching individuals, health coaching. But I was so broken. And it was the first time I showed up with people clear that I did not have all the answers. And that place is sacred, right? Mm-hmm. The ability to show up with somebody else, to honor their story, to know that you don't have anything that's going to fix them, but that you'll walk that journey with them. Mm-hmm. That's good work. And then I started seeing that good work. And so we just leaned into that. So now we say your well-being is like a light that you have inside of you. It's not, when we say, imagine yourself healthy and well, people imagine this version of themselves that's way off in the distance, that if they just do all the right things, they can achieve, right? When in reality, it's this thing that you interact with on a daily basis. So there are things that will amplify your well-being, and there are things that will diminish your well-being. And that can ebb and flow in a day. And as mothers, we know that so well. Like, one moment, I can look at my 3 children playing Legos together and I can be like, I love being a mother. This is the best. I could be deeply nourished. And 5 minutes later, they could be arguing about those very Legos.
Yep.
And
or you step on one.
Right. And I want to, it's more like they started arguing and I go to help them work this out. And then I step on a Lego.
Yes.
I'm like,
yes.
You know, and now we're outside of our well-being, right? And
right.
So,
very much so.
Right. And so I think the idea of then saying to people, like, okay, well, let's talk about your food intake and let's get you more exercise. Like, all of those things are important. I'm not here to say that they're not, but when you're down and out, trying to lift someone up by perfecting some behavior in their life is a bad approach. And as I got more curious about this work, come to find there was psychologists have known this all along, right? Therapists, social workers, they know that this is not the direction we take people, right? And so there's a ton of behavioral science around motivational theory that actually backs up the things that people need. So what we do now is we help businesses when their corporate wellness program isn't working for them. We do a lot of leadership in the industry to help the industry walk out of the bad practices it's been doing. So I was on a live pulse for the Wellness Council of America recently, talking about grind culture and its roots in slavery and how we perpetuate that through corporate wellness. And then I also do a lot of work still with individuals. So right now we have groups that we offer, and we take people through a 6-month or a year-long curriculum of self-discovery so that they can build a life where they can amplify their well-being on a regular basis.
That's beautiful. And I want to connect this to the Enneagram in a minute. But before we do that, I wanted to follow up on part 2 of what you had said earlier when you introduced yourself, about how you and your family, despite the pandemic, have found a way to live your best life. And I have children of similar ages, slightly younger, but, you know, ages of vulnerability where they need us more than they don't, right? And so I wonder if you can talk about what that looks like for you, living your best life despite this pandemic, or maybe because of the I mean, there's so many ways to position this. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the ability to live your best life doesn't come without deep grief.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't come without deep moments of awakening, and we have had those. And so, so I have been in business for 4.5 years when the pandemic hit, and that 4.5 years of hustle was paying off. So my calendar, I was supposed to speak at the Mother Honestly Summit in October. My calendar was booked with events throughout the year. And I had finally arrived as, I mean, we hustle, we hustle and grow.
Yep.
And it just was wiped because all of the work that I did was in person, and businesses weren't sure what they wanted to pay for and how they were going to survive. So, so I had some deep grief to go through and to understand where I was being called next. And as a helper, one of the ways I do that is to understand what people need. But in a pandemic, people don't know what they need. They've never been through a pandemic before.
Right.
They're all like, I don't know. So I had to really take a step back and evaluate from a business perspective what we wanted to do and how we wanted to show up for people. And then as a family, we have just adjusted, right? So recently I pulled my kids out of school entirely. We're now homeschooling.
You're a brave woman.
Right. And that's, that sentiment was, I had the same thing, but I got to thinking, I'm doing so much work, and I live in a privileged neighborhood where the desire is very much to get back to normal. And so while the world around us is on fire, it was like, and now the kids will have a Halloween party, and here's a form to fill out because we need donations. And also for parent-teacher conferences, we'd like to collect donations. And here's another form, and here's 14 more emails from last week. And so while they were hustling to add more, I desperately needed less. And I'm in a household where I run my own business, so I don't have a boss. My husband works for a church, and he has a lot of autonomy in his work, and they really honor this experience for people, for their employees. So I have 2 fully functioning, totally autonomous adults in my house. I can't even imagine what it's like for other families, right?
Yeah.
So I just got to this point where I just wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And I did the research. I'm in a 2-wing 3. I did my homework. I prepared myself, right, to be successful, to lean into that achiever side. I reached out to I have an uncle who's an elementary education professor at the University of Hawaii. I got his feedback. Like, is this going to ruin my kids? And so we have this really beautiful existence that, again, I want to honor the fact that the people who are like, I need the Halloween party, that's real for them. Like, maybe they're 7s. Maybe they're like, we need the Halloween party, please.
Yeah. Right.
I don't want to say that what the school was doing was wrong. I want to say it wasn't for me.
Right.
And so honoring my well-being and my job as a mother is to say, what's the path that we need to go? And how do we need to do this?
Yeah. I'm just taking notes.
Yeah. So the best life thing is like, look, we're as crazy as ever, but we've made the choices that have been right for our family within the means that we have. And I want to honor the fact that I'm deeply privileged. And I know that not everybody could make that decision.
Yeah.
So.
And understand. And what I really like here, and this sticks out to me and kind of pertains to our last question, but I think it's worth reiterating now, is you're, as a mother, as a human, and especially as a 2, which this is a very developed thought process for a 2, you are honor my well-being and my job as a mother. It's not an or, it's a both. And so again, honor my well-being, and that will look different for everyone. And the path that you've chosen honors that. And because of that, it honors your job as a mother.
Yes.
I think that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So, with that being said, let's talk about your line of work, your career, what you're doing in your day-to-day, as well as how you're serving your family and what that looks like leading with the 2-wing 3 motivation.
Yeah. What it looks like is when I feel like maybe, like when my daughter comes to me, my 9-year-old, this transition's been really hard for her, and she's like, I miss my teachers, right?
Yeah.
Is allowing her to honor that and not needing her to validate my desire or my need, for her to say, like, this is going really well. Thank you so much, right? And reminding myself in that moment where I want for her to say, I miss my teachers, but I'm glad you did this.
Yeah.
Right? Is just to remind myself that I am a part of the functional whole of this group, and that my job is not to continuously sacrifice myself for that functional whole. That if I'm not functioning, if I'm not okay, then we're not all okay. Right? And so I can honor the fact that she misses her teachers. That's real for her. And just be present with that without, and my own background thought is, okay, this is okay, right? This was still a good decision. She's still thriving, and I'm also thriving now, right? So I found it really interesting that when I made the decision to homeschool, all of a sudden, all of these ways that I wanted to interact with my motherhood, I felt like I could enter into, that I felt all the time before I was in conflict with. So like, Mom, will you read to me? No, I'm busy, right? Mom, will you? And now it's like, Mom, will you read to me? Sure. And I said to my husband, like, I don't understand why I've had this such a massive shift. And as we kind of talked through it, I had this epiphany that within the school system, that constant desire to like achieve and perfect and do all the things that they had outlined as successful was like just this armor. I was armored up with that. And so like that armor is so exhausting. And so this decision for me has allowed me to take off the armor and allowed me to just be free to be the kind of mother that I inherently know is right. And to honor that and to be present with these kids in that way. Right. So, and again, I'm not anti-school. This is this was right for our family decision. So I think it's interesting because the point for me that I really began to understand what it means to be a 2-wing 3 was after I had my second child, or really when I entered motherhood, probably. Like I saw the shadow side of it too. I mean, I can say that now, but as I learned about the Enneagram, I was able to look back and go, oh, so motherhood is a time when you have a tremendous amount of need, but also you're moving into this nurturing role. And so I just leaned into my 3 to just perfect motherhood, right? And like the way that I quieted all my own needs, because 2s hate to have needs, right? It's like the weakest we've ever been is if we have needs.
A sick 2 is their worst nightmare.
See, and this is really fascinating because I was raised in an anti-grind culture household.
That's great.
As a child. And so I'm a 2 and I want to help people. But like when I'm sick, I'm like, y'all can shut it down. I'm going to bed.
I love it.
I mean, so it's really interesting for me. But the way that it really got to me was, it was in becoming a mother was the point at which I learned to just shut all my needs down unless I was sick, apparently.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then it just became it was a long time before. So I was like this 2-wing 3 who in my career, I would help you achieve,
Yeah.
to fit you. And in motherhood, I would perfect my motherhood, and that's how I could be the best nurturer.
Do you think when you say, so it's interesting word choice, I want to dissect this for a minute. I see the 3 when you talk about the career. I wonder if you see a 1 wing a little bit in the motherhood with the need to perfect motherhood.
Well, I use the word perfection, but I think it was achieve. Like I wanted
Okay.
to achieve motherhood.
Okay. What does that look
And
like?
well, like I read everything I needed to read. I read all the things, and I was clear in my story about motherhood, and I could be like, we're doing this and this and this and this, right? So we made our own baby food. We had cloth diapers.
Yeah.
You know, we sleep trained. So it was about this achievement, the ability to like do it all and know it all, than it was about perfection, I think.
Okay.
And that's what leads me into the 3.
Got it.
So yeah.
Well, and because like with the 3, that desire to win, that desire to be the best, you know what I mean? So I can hear that in what you're saying.
So nobody could tell me that I wasn't doing a good job in motherhood.
Yeah.
I had read it all and I was doing it all. Yeah. Yes.
That's an enormous amount of pressure.
Yes. And right, like no wonder I had a mental breakdown at some point. Like that's impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I
I
should
think,
say, thank God I had a mental breakdown at some point.
Right. Both really, you know, and I think it can be both. So I find that really interesting. The notion of a 2 walking into motherhood, as much as motherhood opens all of us, like cracks us all wide open. And I shouldn't say all, but cracks a lot of us wide open in some way, shape, or form. I often, when I do Enneagram workshops, talk to women about how if you're a mother, a spouse, have anybody that you are serving in the capacity of your womanhood, you are serving with that divine feminine, that maternal instinct that is inherent in you, whether you have children or not. So 2s are often the 2 is often the most immediate surface relatable number for a lot of women, because we inherently are intuitive about helping and meeting needs, and we tend to do it at the behest of ourselves. Once we dig deeper, we understand with the Enneagram that it's motivation driven, and that's where we can separate whether or not we identify with leading with a 2 motivation or not. But I always often warn women, don't automatically assume you're a 2 just because you're in a season of life where you have to give a lot of yourself. And it's truly about that motivation of, to be needed is to be loved, to feel needed, to be able to offer help, to have that value of offering help to others is how you open up yourself to receiving love. And so, you know, for a 2 to arrive at motherhood, the pinnacle of having to give for most of us, right? It must be the magnitude of that pressure at the inception of it must be even more enhanced for a 2 who's already feeling that desire to be needed. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I did was, like, I just armored up. Like, I did not enter into motherhood the way some women do, in this very sacred way. It was like I leaned so hard into that 3 because I didn't know. It was like, how could I give more of myself? How could I? Yeah. So I just, like, yeah, I just was like, woo, like I will achieve motherhood. I will be the ultimate helper to the family, versus this, like, I will open myself up to this and receive in this journey. Well, so Absolutely. And I mentioned earlier, like my marriage was a mess. So my husband is a 1-wing 9.
Okay.
And so for him, like when I started saying like I have these needs, it was like it was this pain cycle, the shame cycle of like, one, I'm saying I have needs, and his response to that was, the 9 was like, I want peace about this. Like,
yes,
this is so peaceful. You're bringing conflict in.
Right.
Partnered with then the perfection, like his own sense that he had failed me. And so for years, just struggled with how to show up for each other in that place. And, we've had a lot of time to like process this after the fact. And I was actually telling him about doing this interview, and it's when we had this conversation about this clash of like me feeling I was needy, him feeling that conflict. So I would shut down my needs until I would get to a breaking point again and bring them back up, and but one of the things is like we both always believed that we cared deeply about each other, that we were just like a misunderstanding on some point. Like we never got to the point that it was like, this person is like malintended.
Right.
So it's how we showed up for a very long time, keep trying to get it right.
How were you able to turn that around?
Well, first of all, it was stepping out of other things that weren't honoring my needs. So like starting my own business and stepping out of an employer that was outside my values.
Yep.
Which would give a little bit of reprieve. But then I started my own business, and I had a third child in the midst of starting my own business.
That's how it happens, right?
Right.
I know about that.
Yeah. And then, so there were little ways that we would, in the external world, try to keep making things better through some of our life choices, right? But ultimately, after we had our third child, some other life events happened, and we ended up going to a therapist who was incredible and really honored both of us and held us very sacredly and allowed us to unpack, the harm that we had endured from each other over the past several years. So
I think that's great.
Therapy.
Well, no, and
go if you need to go.
Yeah, or go if you don't. Like, just keep going. Like, I'm with you.
Right,
I'm with you. Like, it's just nourishing your relationship. So I wanted to call out a few things there in working on mending the fracture within your relationship with your husband. Was one, honoring your needs and starting your own business. So what you did there was you focused inward. And I think you can't really mend relationships until you work on what's inside, right? Because you're not ready to be open otherwise. So I heard that for you specifically was you went inward for a bit and did things that served you. And so I know you said that it was external focused in terms of starting your business and so forth, but actually it served you and your soul. It fed your soul. And I think that gives us the strength to be able to receive help. And then the second thing, and I think this is important, is marriage counseling is a wonderful thing. And it's there to help people. And if we're in a fortunate enough position that we can access marriage counseling, it's a healthy thing to do, no different than going to the gym and taking care of your body. So you have to start somewhere. And so I think that that's really, really great. And I just want to honor that for a second and say thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I mean, it was really life-saving for us. I mean, and actually again, you talked about if you can do it, which is sad that we even have to say that. But again, my husband works for a church, and they have a really robust employee assistance program. And so he actually went first. He said, he came home one day and he said, I got a therapist, and it was career focused for him. And then again, like his career was really impacting my well-being at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so as he started to work out some of his own things, it got to this point where we were back in this same conversation about meeting both of our needs in our marriage. And so at that point I went, and again, it was by the fact that his employer has a really robust, we were allowed 10 visits a year, and that's rare. And I think one of the things when it comes to corporate wellness is like, stop handing people a stress app and pay for an EAP.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Or do both.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's dive into the type 2 motivation for a little bit.
Okay.
So as I said earlier, the type 2 motivation is to be needed, because to be needed is to be loved. Often twos can be one of the most empathetic numbers on the Enneagram, and really see and predict and be proactive about what people need and meet their needs before the individuals they're helping even know that they need it. And if it's coming from a place of love, typically it's an action that is altruistic, pure, and received well. If it is coming from a place of need, because the two doesn't know how to just ask for what they need, and that's usually the shadow space of a two, then they will act and help in order to try to receive same back. However, what they don't understand is that people don't think like they do always. And so when the recipient of that help leaves them hanging, a harbored resentment and pain, anger, and shame starts to develop, and it hurts the two. So that's, kind of the motivation behind that. Typically, these motivations, assuming that you've had a non-disruptive childhood, a childhood of privilege in some way, shape, or form, typically these situations start between the ages of 8 to 10 and 13 years old. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit, you've already mentioned your childhood a little bit, but talk a little bit about your childhood and where you think this motivation started developing and why.
So one, I just want to say that when you talk about being needed and showing up and being loved, like you just, and then the resentment when that's not reciprocated because other people think differently, you just described like 4 years of issues in my marriage in 2 minutes or less. Like that's exactly what happened. Is I was like, oh, I know how to solve this. I'll serve more.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give more. Because this is what he needs and that will be reciprocated. So, but as far as my childhood goes, so I was a hero child. So I'm the fourth of 5 children. Okay. There are 3 years in between the first 3 and the last 2. So I behave a little bit like a first.
Okay.
And though I grew up in an incredibly loving and safe household, we experienced a lot of traumatic loss. So when I was in 5th grade, some family friends of ours, their oldest son shot and killed everyone in the family and then took a gun to school.
Oh my gosh.
So like I was, when we talk about grief circles, like I was outside that grief circle. So the people who died were my older sister's friends, my older brother's friends. Yeah. And so like again, being a 2, I was like, oh, I understand that their grief is different than mine. Mm-hmm. And in this, my family's grief, I will show up in this and be helpful. Right. Yeah. And so like, if my parents got into an argument, which again, like I'm talking like healthy parents argue. Right. I would clean the house. Like I would do the dishes. It was like, what can I do to just make things a little bit better for mm-hmm. somebody else who's having a hard time, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So again, part of that therapy experience was me unpacking, where does all of that come from for me? Yeah. And it's really, it's an interesting thing for me because typically hero children arrive out of households that have abuse, drug abuse, like any number of other issues.
Will
So
you
it's,
please define hero children for us? Because I'm not clear on what
yeah.
that is.
So, I mean, this is a term that my therapist gave me, but like, so I'm not a therapist, but my understanding is it's a child who, when there is, you know, any amount of chaos, again, typically around alcohol or drug abuse in a household, physical abuse, economic collapse, you know, there's a child who will protect the family and will work to get really good grades in school, to like wherever they can show up and give the appearance that everything's fine. So for me, it was like the house will be clean, right?
Gotcha.
Like I can do the dishes, I can do other things. And so you know, my dad recently joked, like, as a child, we would say jump and you would say how high. I said, oh, I know, I've worked on that a lot in therapy. Like, you're right, you know? And so now people say jump and I go, why? You know? And then of course, like as a woman, you know, I think the other aspect is watching a generation of women who are our mothers find leadership in a system that wasn't designed for their success.
Yeah.
So I watched my mom lead by being an amazing volunteer at school, in my school. I watched my mom lead when, you know, when her sister was down and out, my mom dropped everything and was there for her in really meaningful ways. So my mom is a helper, and I watched her do that, and I watched her take care of other people. And what's been really beautiful is, as I have discovered my own two-ness, is like her being alongside that journey and saying like, oh wow, this is really interesting. And you know, recently she said, I wish I would have known some of the things that you know now around this, right? So not to, like, the thing about twos is they show up in such beautiful ways. Like they have this courage to walk into a lot of situations that other people won't. But there's a point at which they're just not taking care of themselves.
Yep. Wow, that's really profound. I'm just digesting what you just shared. And I can absolutely see how that motivation would develop in a circumstance like that during childhood. And it's very interesting, the notion of a hero child. And I can think of so many ways this child could apply to so many different archetypes, if not all of them, in their, you know, in their own way. So that's a really interesting aspect that I'll be exploring further, you know, and thinking about the development of these motivations in childhood. So thank you for sharing that.
Welcome.
So let's talk, and you've touched on this a little bit, about how the Enneagram has helped you in motherhood. So maybe let's start with when you learned about the Enneagram and the time you developed learning about the Enneagram and your awareness of it, and then how that helped you in motherhood.
I learned about the Enneagram while I was in my previous employer. So it wasn't a time for me to enter into self-growth. And I was fascinated by it because I'm an expert in well-being, and the idea of like people understanding their personalities as a way of personal growth is fascinating to me. Like I love Myers-Briggs as well. I like all the personality things. They're fascinating. But I don't know when after that I started to do a little bit more. But I am also in the process of becoming an Episcopal Priest. And
that's right. You told me that.
Yeah. And so as a part of that process, you go through a 2-day psych eval. So I took several assessments to make sure, one, I was psychologically sound, but also we did Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram. And so that assessment, I know I've heard you say on other of these interviews, like the assessments oftentimes are wrong. I mean, for me, it was like, hit me on the head, you know,
And it depends on which one you do, right? I
Right.
mean, the Enneagram Institute's assessment has a good accuracy rate, and that's the only one I recommend. And it gives you a jumping off point, right?
And
So,
that's the first one I took, actually, which was years before I went through the psych eval.
mhm,
And it was a 2. It came back a 2. And,
mhm.
other ones, like, I would love to be a 7. Like, there's like this part of me that's like, I want to be fun. Like, I want to be big life, So I don't know, like, what part of me has a desire to be a different one. But I think 2 speaks to so much of my life experience. It makes sense based on what I experienced in childhood.
Mhm.
So, and I do, as a woman, a 2 allows me to show up in a leadership position in really meaningful ways and in safe ways, right? In a society that admonishes women in leadership when they're come in as an 8 or other probably stronger, like outward strength positions. I think that makes sense too. And the last assessment that they reviewed with me right before I left the psych eval, which as a 2, I really wish they would have started with this one, because a 2-day psych eval for a 2 is like torture, right? Because you're just like being pulled apart. Like, you're like, no, I'm really good, and you love me, right? You love me. I'm really good at this. You love me. That's what you meant to say.
Where an 8 would just be like, no, I'm not.
Yeah. Well, in stress.
Don't you tell me how I am.
Well, in stress, I moved towards an 8.
Right.
So in that process, I was absolutely like, no to all of this.
That is so funny.
But the last assessment they gave me was a leadership assessment. And out of 18 qualities that are desirable in leadership, I had 17 of them.
Wow.
And it was like, I have been using my 2-ness to hide my leadership, right? I will be likable. I will be, and I will help you.
Yeah.
Right.
And do you wonder if, I'm sorry, I'm going to insert a question here to evolve on that. Do you wonder if also it's a matter of worthiness, wondering whether or not you're worthy of that leadership role?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, the likability is probably stronger, but that probably, like, right underneath that likability is that worthiness, right?
Yeah.
If you don't like me, that touches, like, am I even worthy? If you don't deem me worthy, if I'm not likable.
Got it.
So I literally took that assessment in to my therapist and laid it out on the table. And I was like, help me with this. The one trait of a leader that I did not get, the 18th, was being seen. And I was like, wow. Holy smokes. Yeah. I have been hiding. And again, like, in fairness to me, I'm hiding in my leadership because our society doesn't treat female leaders that want to be that strong kindly. They are unlikable. And so I feel a lot of conflict in my leadership as a 2. Yeah. Because I want to, like, I feel like I don't know how to change the fact, and I probably never will, that I want to be liked, that I want to be seen as worthy. So anyway, that's where I'm at with that. And maybe at some point you and I can talk and you can tell me how I can work on that. But I mean, I have done a lot of work with my therapist as well. So it's fascinating.
Well, and so that is very interesting to me, and especially because, you know, I'm so sorry that I failed to mention this in your bio, but the fact that you're working toward becoming an Episcopal priest. Is that the right terminology? Priest? Yeah. And so that's remarkable in and of itself. It's a very brave thing. It's a very traditionally, quote unquote, masculine role. And so for a 2 to be pushing toward that and to hold all those inner leadership qualities that you have is just incredibly remarkable. And I'm grateful that you're stepping out there to pursue something like this, because as a steward of women in general, it's important that we assume the roles that we are divinely designed for, even when we're scared. So all of that is fascinating to me, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I know that when we talk about motherhood, you had mentioned earlier at the inception of motherhood, you really leaned into your three wing, and we're looking to achieve that title of best mom that needs no help because she's got it all together and she's buttoned up, and all that stuff. So at some point, you said there was the breakdown, which I think a lot of us moms can relate to, because we finally realize we're human.
Right.
And so how did the two motivation come into play? And, the to be needed is to be loved. How did that motivation come into play, both as a positive and as a shadow?
So are you talking like pre-breakdown or post-breakdown?
Both. Where did you see that to motivation?
Well, like so I was the primary earner of my family.
Mm-hmm.
My husband was a stay-at-home dad. So first of all, I felt like we were leading, and I was able to, I would talk a lot in my leadership about the ways that men can be leaders in the household and in child rearing. And I think, again, the shadow side of that was so I would come home and he would leave to go do his work. He had some work that was his. It was just part-time. And he was growing his career at the time. And so I would come home after a long day of work. I'm a young mother. I'm breastfeeding. Breastfeeding's not going well. And I was just alone.
Yep.
But rather than actually saying, like, I need human connection right now. I need to be able to sit on the couch with somebody when I come home from work at the end of the day and just be myself and not be a leader.
Yeah.
Was a place where I just didn't even state those things.
Yeah.
And the time at which I finally did begin to state those things, again, that's where we hit that pain cycle, that shame cycling, where he wasn't in a place to hear that. I think he had a lot of shame about being a man and not being a primary earner, even though these were things we felt like that we had talked about. You don't know how deep that stuff runs.
Right, right.
So I saw it there, both the positive of being somebody who could lead and say, like, I'm like, look, this is what a household can look like. Look, we're doing it, right? And in many ways, we took very good care of each other, right? It just, when it got to the point that both of us had needs that weren't being met, we didn't know we couldn't come together on that. And then, like, post breakdown, I was out of, I think Brene Brown talks about the point in the story that the story changes is when all of the rules you've been playing by don't work for you anymore. And that's it.
I love patron Saint Brene. I love her.
I know. And
Thank God for Brene.
Like, what all of the rules I'm playing by aren't working for me.
Yeah.
Not like I played by all the rules and I am drowning.
Yeah.
Right? I've been the perfect mother, the achieving mother. I've been all of the things. And I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I'm not okay. And so I think after that, like, the shadows, at that point, I had no rules. Like, at that point, I gave myself the grace. I left that job. And even though I had started a business, I knew I was in no place to come out and lead. So I literally gave myself 3 months to recover because I had been years in drowning for years. And I was totally broken. There was no showing up. And that's the thing about, like, the stories that we tell, always, we focus so much on the ending. And now I'm here and I worked so hard to achieve this success. No, there was a point that you're here because you had some deep grief and you were in shit. Like, that's real.
Yep.
So yeah, so I don't know how the shadow side necessarily came out in that. Right now, when the
Mm-hmm.
shadow side appears, I remind myself that when I model self-care, when I meet
Mm-hmm.
my own needs, that I'm modeling that for my children.
Yes. Yes.
And
It's so good.
this whole language around body liberation and grind culture that these Black women have been leading for decades now
Mm-hmm.
has been incredibly nourishing to me,
Mm-hmm.
because it helps me to understand the ways in which grind culture is so damaging
Mm-hmm.
to ourselves. So it's like
Yeah.
that's what I can lean into in these
Mm-hmm.
moments, is this leadership from Black women around these topics.
Well, and the
Um,
power of rest as resistance, that is such a
yes,
powerful notion to me. And it's like, thank you for surfacing that. And where have I been? Like, thank you for bringing that to light. And you know, one thing that I'll comment on that I heard, that I know you said, I'm not sure where I see the shadow space. Where I heard it just now was when when you were coming home from work and your husband was leaving, your cup was beyond full, and there was no space for you, right? Because I know that when I work all day and I get home and the kids are all mine until bedtime, there's nothing left for me. And that is give, 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 give. And that is a signature burnout symptom, especially for a two. So where I hear that pain and that shadow space truly was that cycle, that nonstop cycle, and never pausing to allow something for yourself, that contact with your husband, that adult time, or even rest as resistance, all of that. So I think that really speaks a bit to that space as well. But I really love what you have to say in your sentiment about the education and expertise that are, the Black female leadership and just Black women in general, and their culture, and the message of love, of self-love, and rest, that is so of value to all of us if we would just lower our guards and pay attention and quietly listen and learn.
yeah, right. It's been, like I said, it's been a real emergence for me. And I agree that is the shadow side, 100% pre-breakdown.
Hmm.
But I don't know, like once I hit the wall,
Hmm.
I don't, it literally was just like I had to learn, like all of that shame voice was coming up of like, you
Hmm.
failed.
Hmm.
And it was literally like learning to enter into my own worth, my own belonging.
Hmm.
And so I guess the shadow side of it too was coming up as like failure,
Yeah.
right? Like you
Yep.
failed, you can't help anybody right now. How will you ever help people again?
Yep.
Like, and I just had to say like, I will, but I'm gonna
Yep.
rest first, right?
Exactly.
And I mean, I had to say those things to myself.
Yep.
So yeah.
Well, yes, thank you for that. Um, well, we'll wrap this up with the last question, which is, what kind of parenting suggestions or tips, like, could you offer that really come from in the Enneagram strengths that you have as a type 2, that you think would be helpful for all parents to think about?
Okay, so this is my one tidbit I've been offering to everybody. Um, whether you're a teacher in school system right now, whether you're in a leadership position in a business, a school system, a hospital, anywhere, like anywhere that you lead in your own life, when you are struggling, that is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of exhaustion. And if you are exhausted, so is everyone else. And take your foot off the gas.
I
That's
have
it.
goosebumps.
Like, what I keep seeing right
So
now
good.
is we're in a pandemic. We've got this election. We've got so many social justice issues that we are all broken over.
Yeah.
And for those of us in privilege, this deep responsibility to show up for this, and we need to.
Mm-hmm.
We can't let our apathy exist in our rest. So I want to differentiate those two things.
Yes.
But what I do want to say is what I keep seeing is people in leadership struggling, and when they see their struggle as their own failure, so they push on the gas harder.
Mm-hmm.
And this is nobody needs this right now. Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Take your foot off the gas. Let some stuff fail.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're struggling, so is everybody else around you.
Yeah. That's powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you very much for sharing your story, for your wisdom, for giving us a lot of thoughts about how we can care for ourselves, offerings of resources that will help us evolve as people. I encourage everybody to follow Maggie's handle. It will be posted on this post. And I just think you're amazing, and I look forward to the day we can meet in person and continue this friendship. I really appreciate connecting to you, and I'm grateful for that.
Yes. Amen. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Maggie. Have a great weekend, okay?
Yes.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right, everybody. That was Maggie Gough, mother of 3, owner of Realize Wellbeing, 2 Wing 3. If you didn't get a chance to check out this whole interview, please go back and watch it. It was powerful, very enlightening, and just really a great conversation, understanding what it's like to be a 2, a mom, and listening to her magnificent work. And Maggie, we wish you luck on completing your path to becoming an Episcopal priest. That is really, really cool. Thank you again to Fit Philosophy for sponsoring this episode. Fit Philosophy is a balanced approach to fitness, and you can win a virtual 40-day to personal revolution series with Jessica Mullenkamp. It's a yoga series, winter yoga series, January 31st through February 28th. All you need to do is follow my handle, Wellison Enterprises, Fit Philosophy's handle, and Maggie Gough's handle. All of this will be posted in the post, and comment on this episode. Next week, let's see here. I believe we have 1 or 2 episodes. Daisy Owens is going to be with us. She is an Enneagram 9 for you 9s out there, so get excited about that. I will have more on that schedule coming soon. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.